The scream cut through the howling wind like a blade through silk, and that sound would haunt Jackson Dalton for the rest of his days, though at the moment he could barely hear it over the roar of the blizzard that had descended upon the high country of northern New Mexico with brutal, unforgiving force. Jackson had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing his sturdy sorrel mare through terrain that would have broken lesser horses, trying to get back to Piñon before the storm hit in earnest. He had been up in Colorado territory, delivering a herd of cattle for his employer, the sprawling ranch that sprawled across thousands of acres just outside Piñon, and the November sky had been threatening snow for days. Now, in the year of our Lord 1878, he found himself caught in what the old-timers would later call the worst early winter storm in a generation. The temperature had plummeted so fast that Jackson's breath froze in his mustache, and visibility had shrunk to mere feet ahead of his horse's nose. He had been looking for any kind of shelter, anything to get out of the wind that cut through his heavy coat like it was made of paper, when he heard that sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks, screaming through the rocks and pines that dotted this stretch of wilderness. But then he heard it again, weaker this time and unmistakably human. Jackson pulled his mare to a halt, straining his ears against the storm. The horse whinnied nervously, her ears flicking back and forth. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice rough from hours of silence. "I hear it too." He dismounted, his boots sinking into snow that was already knee-deep, and led the horse forward slowly, following the direction of that terrible, desperate sound. His heart hammered in his chest, and not just from the cold. Out here, in conditions like these, hearing another human voice could mean the difference between life and death for both of them if they could pool their resources. Or it could mean finding someone beyond help, frozen and dying in the merciless grip of winter. The Snowdrift appeared out of the white curtain of falling snow like a ghost, a massive bank that had formed against a rock outcropping. And there, partially buried in the snow, was a covered wagon, tilted at a dangerous angle, one wheel clearly broken. The canvas covering was torn and flapping violently in the wind, and Jackson could see no sign of horses or oxen that might have pulled it. "Hello," he shouted, his voice barely carrying. "Is someone there?" The response was immediate, a weak cry that sent ice through Jackson's veins for an entirely different reason than the cold. That was a woman's voice, and she sounded like she was in terrible trouble. Jackson tied his mare to the broken wagon wheel and scrambled up the snowdrift, his hands and knees sinking into the powder, his muscles burning with the effort. The wagon's back opening was partially blocked by snow, but he managed to pull himself up and peer inside. The sight that met his eyes would be burned into his memory forever. A young woman, probably no more than 22 or 23 years old, lay in the dim interior of the wagon, surrounded by what looked like the remnants of household goods, blankets, and supplies. Her face was pale as death itself, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat despite the cold, and her eyes were wide with pain and fear and exhaustion. But what stopped Jackson's heart in his chest was the tiny, red-faced bundle she held against her chest, wrapped in what looked like a torn petticoat and a thin blanket. A baby. She had a newborn baby. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice cracking. "Please help us. I do not know if he is breathing right. I do not know what to do." Jackson did not waste time with questions. He could see the blood, could see the makeshift way she had tried to care for herself and the infant, could see the hypothermia already setting into her lips and fingertips. If he did not act fast, both mother and child would be dead before morning. "Madam, my name is Jackson Dalton," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady even as his mind raced. I am going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay with me, you understand? Keep that baby warm against your skin. The woman nodded weakly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you. I thought we would die here. I thought no one would come. Jackson assessed the situation quickly. The wagon was too damaged to provide real shelter, and he could not possibly move both the woman and the baby separately, not in these conditions. He needed to find better shelter and fast. He remembered passing a rocky overhang about a quarter-mile back. Not much, but it would at least break the wind and give them a chance to start a fire. "How long ago did you have this baby?" he asked, already pulling blankets from the wagon and wrapping them around both mother and child. "Hours," she said, her voice shaking. "I lost track. The labor started this morning when the storm hit. My husband went to find help when my pain started, but the horses broke free and ran, and the wagon wheel broke when it slid into the drift. He should have been back by now." Something must have happened. Jackson's jaw tightened. A man who left his laboring wife alone in a storm was either desperate or a fool, but he pushed that thought aside. The only thing that mattered now was survival. "I am going to carry you," he said. "It is going to hurt, and I am sorry for that, but we need to get to better shelter." "Can you hold on to the baby?" she nodded, clutching the infant tighter. "I will not let go." Jackson wrapped her in every blanket and piece of fabric he could find in the wagon. Then carefully, as gently as possible given the circumstances, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, probably from months of hard travel and privation, and she let out a small cry of pain as he shifted her, but she did not complain further. The baby let out a thin wail, and Jackson felt a surge of relief. At least the child was alive enough to cry. Getting down from the wagon with his precious cargo was treacherous, but Jackson had spent his entire life in rough country, and his boots found purchase where others might have slipped. His mare whinnied when she saw him, and he thanked God for her steady temperament as he awkwardly mounted while holding the woman, settling her across his lap as best he could. "What is your name?" he asked as he turned the horse back the way he had come, squinting against the driving snow. "Lily," she said softly. "Lily Crawford, and my baby, I have not named him yet. I wanted to wait for my husband." "Well, Lily Crawford, you and your boy are going to be just fine," Jackson said with more confidence than he felt. "Just hold on tight and keep him warm." The ride to the overhang felt like it took hours instead of minutes. Every step of the horse a potential disaster in the deep snow and poor visibility. Jackson could feel Lily growing weaker in his arms, her head lolling against his chest, and he talked to her constantly, asking her questions to keep her conscious. "Where were you heading?" he asked. "California," she murmured. "My husband heard there was land, good farm land and work. We have been traveling since August from Missouri." "That is a long journey," Jackson said, his eyes scanning for the landmarks he remembered. "You must be tired of traveling." "So tired," she agreed. "So tired." "Well, once we get you warmed up and rested, I will get you to Pinon. That is the nearest town. It is not much, but there is a doctor there and good people." "You are good people," Lily said, and he could hear the tears in her voice. "You saved us. I was praying so hard, and then you came." Jackson's throat tightened. He was not a particularly religious man, but he had to admit the timing seemed providential. Another hour, maybe less, and he would have missed them entirely, would have passed by without hearing her cries over the storm. Finally, blessedly, the rocky overhang appeared out of the swirling snow. It was not large, maybe 15 feet deep and 10 feet wide, but it was dry and the wind could not reach all the way to the back. Jackson dismounted carefully, carrying Lily and the baby to the driest spot, and laid them down on a relatively flat section of rock. "I am going to start a fire," he said. Do not fall asleep yet, Lily. I need you to stay awake just a little longer. She nodded, but her eyes were already starting to close. The baby was quiet now, which worried Jackson more than the crying had. He worked with desperate speed, gathering what dry wood he could find sheltered under the overhang, along with some fallen pine branches. He pulled a small amount of kindling from his saddlebag, something he always carried, and used his flint and steel with hands that shook from both cold and urgency. The first sparks failed to catch. So did the second attempt. Jackson cursed under his breath, his fingers stiff and clumsy, but he forced himself to slow down, to be methodical. On the fourth try, a tiny flame caught in the kindling, and he carefully, so carefully, nursed it into life, adding small twigs and then larger pieces until he had a real fire burning. The warmth was immediate and glorious, and Jackson quickly moved Lily and the baby closer to the flames, though not so close as to be dangerous. He unloaded his saddlebags, pulling out his own bedroll and an oilskin tarp, creating a better barrier between them and the cold stone. Then he turned his attention to the mare, rubbing her down and covering her with a saddle blanket, positioning her at the entrance to the overhang where she could provide an additional windbreak. Only then did he allow himself to really look at Lily and her baby. The infant was tiny, probably early based on his size, with a shock of dark hair and a face that was slowly turning from red to a more normal pink as the warmth reached him. Lily had him tucked inside her dress, skin to skin, which was exactly right for keeping him warm. But Lily herself was in bad shape. Even in the firelight, Jackson could see that she was far too pale, and she was shivering violently despite being close to the flames. "Lily, I need to make sure you are not still bleeding badly," Jackson said, feeling his face heat with embarrassment even as he kept his voice professional. "I know that is not proper, but if you are, we have a real problem." Lily's eyes opened slightly. "I think it has mostly stopped," she whispered. "I used cloths like my mother told me, but I am so cold, I cannot get warm." Jackson pulled out the only other shirt he had in his pack, along with his spare pair of long underwear, and carefully helped Lily into them without disturbing the baby too much. Then he wrapped her in his bedroll and piled both his coat and hers on top of the bundle. He wished he had more, wished he had a proper bed and warm soup and a doctor, but this would have to do. The baby started to cry again, a thin, reedy sound that spoke of hunger and discomfort. Lily tried to shift him to bring him to her breast, but her movements were weak and uncoordinated. "Let me help," Jackson said, and with awkward but gentle hands, he helped position the baby. The infant latched on almost immediately, and Lily let out a small sob of relief. "Thank you," she whispered for what must have been the 10th time. "I do not know how to thank you enough." "You do not need to thank me," Jackson said firmly. "Any decent person would have done the same." But even as he said it, he knew it was not quite true. Plenty of men would have ridden right past that overturned wagon, would have counted their own survival more important than investigating a sound that might have been nothing. He was just grateful that he was not one of them. As the hours passed and the storm continued to rage outside their small shelter, Jackson tended the fire and kept watch. He had some jerky and hard biscuits in his pack, and he made Lily eat a little, insisting that she needed her strength. She managed a few bites before exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a fitful sleep with her baby still at her breast. Jackson sat with his back against the rock wall, his rifle across his knees, and listened to the howling wind. His mind would not settle. He kept thinking about that broken wagon, about the husband who had not returned, about how close Lily and her baby had come to dying alone in the snow. He thought about the randomness of it all, how he had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, or perhaps exactly the wrong place and wrong time, depending on how you looked at it. He also found himself looking at Lily in the firelight, really looking at her for the first time. Even exhausted and pale, and having just been through what was probably the worst ordeal of her life, she was lovely. Her face had fine features, delicate but strong, and even tangled and dirty. Her hair was a beautiful shade of dark brown with hints of auburn in the firelight. She looked young, though the hardship of the trail had probably aged her beyond her years. Jackson shook his head, trying to dislodge those thoughts. The woman had a husband out there somewhere, probably dead in the snow if he had any guess about it, and here Jackson was noticing how pretty she was. It was not right, not proper, not the time. But as he watched her sleep, watched her arms cradled protectively around her newborn son even in unconsciousness, he felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. Protectiveness, yes, but something more than that. Something that scared him a little. The storm blew itself out sometime in the early hours of morning, the wind dying to a whisper, and the snow finally stopping. Jackson had managed to doze a little, but he was wide awake when the first gray light of dawn started to filter into their shelter. The fire had burned down to coals, and he built it back up, wanting Lily to wake to warmth. She stirred as the light grew stronger, her eyes fluttering open, confusion crossing her face for a moment before memory returned. She gasped and looked down at her baby, relaxing when she saw he was still sleeping peacefully against her. "Good morning," Jackson said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Lily admitted, struggling to sit up, "and still tired, but warmer." "Better." Her eyes met his, and he saw gratitude there that made him uncomfortable in its intensity. "You saved our lives, if you had not found us." "But I did find you," Jackson interrupted gently, "so let us not think about what might have been. The storm has passed, and as soon as you feel strong enough, we need to head for Pinyon. You need a proper doctor to look at you and the baby." Lily nodded, then her face crumpled. "My husband, Thomas. He went for help and never came back. I need to find him. I need to know if he is." "I will look for him," Jackson promised. "But first I need to get you and your boy to safety. That has to be the priority. Once I know you are cared for, I will come back and search for your husband. I give you my word." Lily bit her lip, clearly torn, but finally she nodded. "He would want the baby safe," she said quietly. "He would want me to do what is best for our son." Jackson prepared a meager breakfast of the last of his provisions, which Lily ate slowly, and then he helped her stand. She was shaky on her feet, and he could see pain crossing her face with each movement, but she was determined. He fashioned a sling from a blanket so she could carry the baby against her chest, leaving her hands free to hold onto the saddle. Getting her mounted was an awkward process, but Jackson finally got her settled in front of him again, the baby secure between them. The mare was well rested despite the cold night, and she stepped out confidently as they left the shelter of the overhang. The world had been transformed by the storm. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, and the morning sun turned it all into a blinding glare. Jackson was grateful for the clear sky, even though the temperature was bitter. At least they could see where they were going. They passed the wagon on their way, and Jackson saw Lily's face crumple as she looked at it, partially buried now in the drift. It represented everything she and her husband had owned, all their hopes for a new life, and now it sat abandoned and broken in the wilderness. "I will come back," Jackson said again. "I will search for your husband, and if we can salvage anything from the wagon, I will do that too." "Thank you," Lily whispered, and she said nothing more for a long time. The ride to Pinyon took most of the day, even though it was only about 15 miles from where Jackson had found Lily. The snow made travel slow and treacherous, and he had to stop frequently to let Lily rest and tend to the baby. The infant seemed healthy enough, nursing well when Lily fed him and sleeping peacefully otherwise, but Jackson knew that babies born in such harsh conditions were fragile. It was late afternoon when they finally rode into Pinyon, and if Jackson had expected any kind of welcome, he was disappointed. The small town looked half deserted. Most folks probably hunkered down in their homes after the unexpected storm. But smoke rose from chimneys, and Jackson headed straight for the doctor's office, which was in a small building on the main street. Dr. Samuel Morris was a gruff man in his 50s who had seen just about everything the frontier could throw at him, but even he looked surprised when Jackson carried Lily and her baby through his door. "Good Lord, son, what have you got here?" Morris asked, immediately clearing his examination table and gesturing for Jackson to lay Lily down. "Found her in a snowdrift up north," Jackson said shortly. "She gave birth alone in a broken wagon. The baby seems all right, but she has been through hell." Morris's expression turned serious and he shooed Jackson out of the room. "Wait outside while I examine her properly," he ordered. "And for God's sake, get yourself warmed up. You look half frozen yourself." Jackson paced the small waiting room for what felt like hours but was probably only about 30 minutes. Finally, the doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She is going to be fine," Morris said. "Remarkably fine, actually, considering what she has been through. Strong girl. The baby is small but healthy, good strong lungs and nursing well. They both just need rest and good food and warmth." Jackson felt a weight lift from his chest that he had not fully realized he was carrying. "Thank God," he said softly. "She told me about her husband," Morris continued, his face grave. "You planning to go look for him?" "At first light tomorrow," Jackson confirmed. "I gave her my word." "Take someone with you," Morris advised. "There is a lot of ground to cover, and if he has been out there this long, well, you know what you are likely to find." Jackson nodded grimly. He knew, but he had to try for Lily's sake if nothing else. "Where can she stay?" he asked. "Does she have anywhere to go?" Morris scratched his chin. "The boarding house would be the best bet, but Margaret Fletcher charges rates that a woman with no money and a newborn baby cannot afford. Let me talk to my wife. We might be able to take her in for a few days at least, until she gets her bearings." "I will pay for it," Jackson said immediately. "Whatever it costs. She should not have to worry about money right now." The doctor gave him a long, measuring look. "That is mighty generous of a stranger," he said slowly. Jackson felt his face heat. "It is just the right thing to do," he said stiffly. Morris nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Well then, let me go talk to Martha. You can see Mrs. Crawford now if you like. She has been asking for you." Jackson entered the examination room to find Lily sitting up, looking much better than she had that morning. She was clean now, her face washed and her hair pulled back, and she was wearing what looked like a borrowed dress. The baby was sleeping in a small basket next to her. "Mr. Dalton," she said, her voice much stronger. "The doctor says you are planning to search for Thomas." "First thing tomorrow," Jackson confirmed. "I will take a couple of men with me and we will cover as much ground as we can." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I know what you are likely to find," she said quietly. "I am not a fool. If he could have made it back, he would have, but I need to know. I need to be sure." "I understand," Jackson said. He moved closer, awkward in the face of her grief. "The doctor is arranging a place for you to stay. You do not need to worry about money or anything else. Just focus on recovering and taking care of your boy." "I will repay you," Lily said firmly. "I do not know how or when, but I will. I do not take charity lightly." "It is not charity," Jackson said. "It is just one human being helping another. Out here we have to look after each other or none of us will survive." Lily looked at him for a long moment, and Jackson felt something pass between them, some understanding or connection that he could not quite name. Then she smiled, a real smile that transformed her whole face, and Jackson felt his heart do something strange in his chest. "You are a good man, Jackson Dalton," she said softly. "I think God sent you to me yesterday. I truly do." Jackson did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded and made his excuses, promising to update her as soon as he returned from the search. As he stepped out into the cold evening air of Pinyon, he found himself thinking not about the search ahead, but about the way Lily had smiled at him, and how much he already wanted to see her smile again. The next morning dawned clear and cold, and Jackson set out with two other men from Pinyon, both experienced trackers who knew the country well. They rode to the area where Jackson had found Lily, and from there they began a careful search pattern, looking for any sign of Thomas Crawford. They found him by mid-afternoon, half buried in snow about 2 miles from the broken wagon, in the opposite direction from where Jackson had carried Lily to safety. He had clearly been trying to reach Pinyon when the storm overwhelmed him. Death had probably come from exposure, though they could not be certain without bringing the body back to town. Jackson felt a wave of sadness as he looked at the frozen corpse. Thomas Crawford had been young, probably not much older than Jackson's own 26 years, with a young face that still held traces of hope and ambition even in death. He had been trying to save his wife and unborn child, had died trying, and that was worth something even if he had failed in the attempt. They wrapped him in a canvas tarp and tied him to one of the horses, then made their way back to the wagon to see if anything could be salvaged. Most of the goods were ruined by snow and cold, but Jackson managed to recover a few personal items that he thought Lily might want. A small wooden box that contained what looked like letters and a few pieces of jewelry, a Bible with names written in the front, a couple of photographs in tin frames. Small things, but they represented a life and a history, and he thought they might bring Lily some comfort. It was dark by the time they made it back to Pinyon, and Jackson dreaded the task ahead of him. He went to the doctor's house, where Morris's wife Martha had indeed taken Lily in and asked to speak with her. Lily came to the door holding her baby, and Jackson saw the hope die in her eyes before he even spoke. She had read the answer in his face. "We found him," Jackson said gently. "I am so sorry, Lily. He did not suffer long. The cold takes people quickly." Lily nodded, her face crumpling. She did not cry out or wail, just stood there holding her baby while silent tears streamed down her face. Jackson felt utterly helpless, wanting to comfort her but not knowing how, not knowing if it was proper. "He tried," Jackson said. "He died trying to get help for you. That counts for something." "It does," Lily agreed, her voice breaking. "It does count for something. But it does not change the fact that he is gone, and I am alone with a baby, and I have no money, no home, no way to take care of us." "You are not alone," Jackson found himself saying. "I will help you. We will figure something out." Lily looked at him, and in her eyes Jackson saw exhaustion and grief and fear, but also a spark of something else. Determination, maybe, or the will to survive that had kept her alive through giving birth alone in a blizzard. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do all this for a stranger?" Jackson opened his mouth to give her some easy answer, some platitude about Christian charity or frontier hospitality. But looking at her, at this woman who had been through so much and was still standing, still fighting for her child, he could not bring himself to lie. "Because from the moment I heard you crying in that storm, you stopped being a stranger," he said quietly. "And I do not abandon people who need help." The funeral for Thomas Crawford was held 2 days later, a simple affair attended by Jackson, the doctor, and his wife, and a handful of other townspeople who came out of respect for the dead, even though they had never met him. Lily stood at the graveside holding her baby, dressed in a borrowed black dress, her face pale but composed. Jackson stood beside her, ready to catch her if she fell, but she remained strong throughout the service. Afterward, as the small crowd dispersed, Lily turned to Jackson. "I need to make some decisions," she said, "about what to do next. Would you help me think through my options?" They walked back to the doctor's house, where Martha Morris insisted on taking the baby so Lily and Jackson could talk privately. They sat at the kitchen table, and Lily folded her hands in front of her, her knuckles white with tension. "I have no money," she said bluntly. "Thomas and I spent everything we had to outfit that wagon and make the journey west. Everything we owned was in that wagon, and most of it is ruined. The doctor's wife has been very kind, but I cannot impose on her charity forever. I need to find work, but I do not know what I can do with a newborn baby to care for." Jackson had been thinking about this very problem for the past 2 days, turning it over in his mind from every angle. He knew what the obvious answer was, what most people would expect a destitute widow to do. She would have to find work as a laundress or a cook, back-breaking labor for minimal pay, and the baby would suffer for it. Or she would have to remarry quickly, probably to someone much older who needed a wife and did not much care what condition she came in. But there was another option, one that Jackson had been considering and discarding and considering again, until his head ached with the circular thinking. "What if you stayed here in Pinyon?" he said carefully. "There is not much here, but it is a decent town, and I could help you get established. Maybe we could find you a small place to live, and I could help with expenses until you got on your feet." Lily looked at him searchingly. "Why would you do that? You have already done so much, more than anyone could reasonably expect. I cannot keep taking from you." Jackson took a deep breath. This was the moment, the leap that could not be taken back. "What if it was not just charity?" he said. "What if there was an arrangement that benefited both of us?" Lily's eyes narrowed slightly, and Jackson saw wariness creep into her expression. "What kind of arrangement?" "A marriage," Jackson said, the words coming out in a rush. "Hear me out before you say no. It would be a practical arrangement, nothing improper. You need security and a home for your baby. I have a good job and a steady income, and I could provide that. In return, you would help manage a household, cook, keep house, the things a wife would do. But there would be no expectations beyond that. Separate rooms, no pressure, just a partnership to help each other survive." Lily stared at him, her mouth slightly open in shock. "You want to marry me," she said flatly. "A woman you met 4 days ago, a woman with another man's baby." "I want to help you," Jackson corrected. "And this is the best way I know how. Out here, a woman alone with a child has almost no good options. But a married woman, even in a practical marriage, has respectability and protection. Your son would have a name and a home. You would have security. And I—" He paused, trying to find the right words. "I am 26 years old, and I have been alone for a long time. I always figured I would marry someday, but I never met anyone who seemed right. This would not be a love match, at least not at first, but it could be a good partnership. And maybe over time it could become more." Lily was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face. "You realize how mad this sounds," she finally said. "People get married because they court and fall in love, not because they stumbled across each other in a snowstorm. People out here get married for all kinds of reasons," Jackson countered. "Mail-order brides, arranged marriages, marriages of convenience. At least we have met each other. At least we know we can work together in a crisis." "I just buried my husband," Lily said, and her voice broke. 3 days ago, and you are asking me to marry you." Jackson felt shame wash over him. "You are right," he said. "I am sorry. "That was thoughtless and cruel. Forget I said anything. I will still help you however I can with no strings attached. Please forget I mentioned it." But Lily held up a hand. "No," she said slowly. "No, do not apologize. You are being practical, and I appreciate that. And the truth is, you are right. I do not have good options. I could try to find work, but it would be brutal and my son would suffer. I could try to go back to Missouri, but I have no family there anymore, and no money to make the journey. I could remarry eventually, but most of the men who would take on a widow with a baby are not the kind of men I would want to tie myself to." She took a shaky breath. "Your offer is more generous than I have any right to expect, but I need to think about it. Can you give me a few days?" "Take all the time you need," Jackson said, relief flooding through him. He had been sure she would reject him outright, maybe even be offended by the suggestion. "There is no pressure. I just wanted you to know that the option exists." Over the next week, Jackson visited every day, ostensibly to check on how Lily and the baby were doing, but really because he found he could not stay away. He brought small gifts, practical things like a warmer blanket and a rattle that one of the women in town had carved, and he held the baby while Lily ate or rested. The infant was thriving, growing visibly stronger each day, and Lily had named him Samuel Thomas Crawford, Samuel after the doctor who had helped them, and Thomas after his father. As Jackson spent time with Lily, he found himself drawn to her in ways that went beyond just wanting to help. She was smart and funny when she forgot to be sad, with a quick wit and a way of looking at the world that charmed him. She asked him about his life, about growing up in Texas before drifting north to New Mexico, about his work on the ranch, about his dreams for the future. And he found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about the loneliness of his life, about the ache for something more than just existing day to day. On the 8th day after he had proposed his arrangement, Lily asked him to take a walk with her. They bundled up Samuel and strolled through Piñon's small streets, the baby sleeping peacefully in Lily's arms. "I have been thinking about your offer," Lily said without preamble, "and I have some conditions." Jackson's heart began to pound. "All right." "First, Samuel is and always will be a Crawford. His father's name matters to me, and I want him to know who Thomas was and what he meant to me. I will not pretend he does not exist just because I remarry." "I would never ask you to," Jackson said firmly. "Thomas was a good man who loved his family. Samuel should know that." Lily nodded. "Second, I need time. I know you said there would be no expectations beyond housekeeping and such, but if this is ever going to be a real marriage, I need time to grieve properly and to get to know you. I cannot promise my heart will ever fully belong to someone else, but I can promise to try to be a good wife to you if you will be patient with me." "I can be patient," Jackson said, and he meant it. "Third, I want honesty between us always. No secrets, no lies, even to spare feelings. If this arrangement is going to work, we need to be able to trust each other completely." "Agreed." Lily stopped walking and turned to face him. "Then yes, I will marry you, Jackson Dalton. Not because I love you, not yet, but because I think you are a good man, and because I think we could build something good together. And because I think my son needs a father, and you are the only man I would trust with that responsibility." Jackson felt a wave of emotion so strong it nearly knocked him over. Relief, yes, but also joy and hope and something that felt dangerously like love, though he knew it was too soon for that. "I will take care of you both," he promised. "I swear it on my life." They were married a week later in the doctor's parlor, with Martha Morris and the local minister as witnesses. Lily wore a simple blue dress that Martha had altered to fit her, and she held Samuel throughout the brief ceremony. Jackson wore his best clothes, such as they were, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed Lily's cheek softly, a promise of respect rather than passion. Jackson had rented a small house on the edge of Pinyon, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was clean and sturdy with a good stove and a well nearby. He had furnished it simply: a real bed for Lily, a crib for Samuel that he had built himself from scrap wood, and a bedroll for himself that he placed in the corner of the main room. True to his word, he gave Lily the bedroom and privacy, and he slept by the fireplace like a guard dog protecting his family. The first weeks of their marriage were awkward, a careful dance of 2 strangers learning to live together. Lily was quiet and withdrawn, clearly still grieving, and Jackson gave her space while trying to be helpful. He worked long days at the ranch, but he always came home for dinner, and he spent his evenings doing small tasks around the house or playing with Samuel, who was starting to be more alert and responsive. Slowly, gradually, things began to shift. Lily started to smile more, to talk more freely. She was an excellent cook, creative with the limited ingredients available, and she kept the house spotlessly clean. She also proved to be a talented seamstress, and she began taking and mending work from other families in town, earning a little money of her own that she saved carefully. Jackson found himself falling into the rhythms of domestic life more easily than he had expected. He liked coming home to a warm house and good food. He liked the sound of Lily humming while she worked, liked the baby's gurgles and cries that filled what had been a silent, lonely existence. He especially liked the evenings when Lily would sit by the fire after Samuel was asleep and talk with him, sharing stories of her childhood or asking him about his day. It was on one such evening, about 2 months after their marriage, that things changed between them. Jackson had been fixing a broken chair leg while Lily sat darning socks, and they had been talking about nothing in particular when Lily suddenly set down her work and looked at him. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course. Why have you never married before? You are a good man, hardworking, kind. Surely there were women who would have been interested." Jackson considered the question. "I suppose there were opportunities," he admitted, "but I never felt right about any of them. I always felt like I was waiting for something, though I did not know what. My parents died when I was young, and I have been on my own since I was 16. I got used to being alone, maybe too used to it." "Are you lonely?" Lily asked softly. Jackson looked up and met her eyes across the fire. "I was," he said. "Every day I was lonely, even when I was around other people, but I am not anymore." Lily held his gaze for a long moment, and Jackson saw something shift in her expression, a softening, a warmth that had not been there before. "I am not either," she said quietly. "I thought I would be lonely forever after Thomas died, but you have made a home for us, Jackson. You have made me feel safe, and I want you to know that I see that and I appreciate it more than I can say." Jackson felt his throat tighten. "It is not a hardship," he said roughly. "Taking care of you and Samuel, it is the best thing I have ever done with my life." Lily stood up and crossed to where he sat, and to Jackson's surprise, she bent down and kissed him, a real kiss, soft and lingering and full of promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. "I think I am ready," she said. "If you are ready to make this a real marriage." Jackson stood slowly, hardly daring to breathe. "Are you sure? I do not want to rush you. I can wait as long as you need." "I am sure," Lily said, and she took his hand and led him to the bedroom. That night marked the true beginning of their marriage, and in the days and weeks that followed, Jackson felt their relationship deepen and grow in ways he had never imagined. Lily moved his things into the bedroom, and they fell asleep each night wrapped in each other's arms. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. And slowly, carefully, Jackson began to hope that what they had could last, could be real and true and lasting. Samuel was thriving, growing into a chubby, happy baby who had started to recognize Jackson and smile when he came home. Jackson loved the boy fiercely, and he tried his best to be the father that Samuel deserved, even knowing that he could never replace Thomas Crawford. Lily seemed to appreciate his efforts, and she often told him stories about Thomas so that Samuel would know his father when he was old enough to understand. It was in late spring, as the mountain wildflowers were blooming, and the snow had finally melted from all but the highest peaks, that Lily told Jackson she was pregnant. They were sitting on the small porch of their house, watching Samuel crawl in the dirt of the yard, when Lily took Jackson's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said, and something in her tone made Jackson's heart skip. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Lily said, and she was smiling, a wide, joyful smile that took Jackson's breath away. "I am with child, our child. You are going to be a father, Jackson." Jackson felt as if the world had tilted. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice coming out as little more than a whisper. "Very certain. I have felt this before, and all the signs are there. I would guess I am about 2 months along." Jackson pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. "A baby," he said, wonder filling his voice. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Lily asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Jackson said, and he kissed her deeply. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and overwhelmed. I am everything all at once." Lily laughed, the sound like music. "That is exactly how I feel, though I admit I am less terrified this time, knowing I will not have to do it alone in a snowdrift." Jackson felt a chill at the reminder of how close he had come to never meeting Lily at all. "You will never be alone again," he promised. "Not as long as I draw breath." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lily bloomed with health and happiness. Samuel grew and developed, taking his first steps and saying his first words, and Jackson marveled at the way their small family was growing and changing. He worked hard at the ranch, saving every penny he could, dreaming of the day when he might be able to buy a small piece of land of his own and start his own operation. In December of 1879, just over a year after Jackson had found Lily in the snowdrift, their daughter was born. The birth was easy compared to Samuel's, with Dr. Morris in attendance and Jackson pacing nervously in the next room. When Morris finally called him in to meet his daughter, Jackson felt tears stream down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect baby girl in Lily's arms. "She is beautiful," he breathed, "just like her mother. We need to name her," Lily said, smiling tiredly. "I was thinking maybe Rose Adelaide Dalton." "Rose," Jackson repeated, testing the name. "I love it, Rose Adelaide Dalton." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Lily, looking down at their daughter. "Hello, Rose. Welcome to the world, little one." Samuel, who was now 14 months old and toddling everywhere, was fascinated by his new baby sister. He would stand by her crib and babble at her, and when she was a little older and started to smile, he would laugh with delight at her response. Jackson loved watching them together, loved seeing the bonds of family forming and strengthening. Life settled into a comfortable pattern over the next few years. Jackson continued to work hard, and his reputation as a skilled and trustworthy ranch hand grew. When his boss decided to retire and sell off pieces of the ranch, Jackson was able to purchase 160 acres at a good price, along with a small herd of cattle. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Jackson threw himself into building it up into something they could pass on to their children. Lily proved to be just as hardworking as Jackson, managing the household and the children while also helping with the ranch work when she could. She was an excellent horsewoman, and she taught both Samuel and Rose to ride almost as soon as they could walk. The house they had started in became too small, and Jackson spent 2 summers building a larger home on their land, a real house with multiple bedrooms and a proper kitchen, and a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. In 1881, their second daughter was born, and they named her Catherine Martha Dalton, after Jackson's mother and Dr. Morris's wife, who had been so kind to Lily in those early days. Catherine was a quieter baby than Rose had been, with serious eyes and a thoughtful expression that made her seem wise beyond her months. Samuel, now a sturdy 3-year-old, took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help care for his little sisters. Jackson loved watching him grow, seeing traces of Thomas Crawford in his face and build, but also seeing the influence of his own raising in Samuel's mannerisms and speech. He had long since stopped thinking of Samuel as anyone's child but his own, and Lily had noticed and thanked him for it more than once. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Jackson's ranch grew slowly but steadily, earning a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Lily became a respected member of the community in Pinyon, known for her kindness and her willingness to help new arrivals, especially women traveling alone or in difficult circumstances. She never forgot what it was like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure no one in her reach ever had to feel that way if she could help it. In 1884, their third daughter was born, a surprise baby they had not been expecting. They named her Grace Elizabeth Dalton, and she was a laughing, happy child from the moment she entered the world. With 3 daughters and a son, their house was full of noise and chaos and love, and Jackson could not imagine his life any other way. It was on a cold evening in November of 1885. Almost exactly 7 years after Jackson had found Lily in that snowdrift, that they sat together on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was now a tall, gangly 7-year-old, Rose was a spirited 6, Catherine was a thoughtful 4, and Grace was a toddling 1-year-old who was into everything. "You ever think about that night?" Lily asked suddenly, her hand finding Jackson's. "The night you found me." "All the time," Jackson admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding right past, about how differently things could have turned out." "I think about it too," Lily said softly. "I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that Samuel and I were going to die. And then I heard your voice calling out, and I thought maybe I was already dead and it was an angel come to fetch me." Jackson smiled. "No one has ever mistaken me for an angel before." "But you were," Lily insisted. "You were my angel, sent at exactly the right moment. And I want you to know that I love you, Jackson Dalton. Not because you saved me, though you did. Not because you gave me and Samuel a home, though you did that too. But because you are a good man with a good heart, and because you make me happy every single day." Jackson felt his chest tighten with emotion. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough. "More than I ever thought possible. You and the children, you are my whole world." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Finally, Lily spoke again. "I want to tell you something I have never told anyone," she said. "About that day before you found me." Jackson squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. "After Samuel was born, after I realized Thomas was not coming back, I had this moment where I thought about just giving up, just closing my eyes and letting the cold take us. It would have been so easy, Jackson, so much easier than fighting. But then I looked at Samuel's face and I knew I could not do it. I had to fight for him. I had to survive, even if it seemed impossible. And I am so glad I did, because it brought me to you." Jackson turned to her and cupped her face in his hands. "I am glad you fought," he said fiercely. "I am glad you survived. And I promise you, Lily, that every day for the rest of my life, I will make sure you never regret that decision." "I could never regret it," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "You have given me everything I could ever want. A home, a family, a love I thought I would never feel again. You are my miracle, Jackson." "And you are mine," Jackson whispered, and he kissed her with all the love and tenderness and passion that 7 years of marriage had built between them. The children ran up to the porch then, clamoring for dinner and attention, and the moment broke. But as Jackson scooped up Grace and Lily took Catherine's hand, with Samuel and Rose racing ahead to the house, he knew that this was what happiness looked like. Not some grand adventure or dramatic declaration, but just this: a family, a home, and someone to love who loved him back. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Samuel grew into a fine young man, strong and capable, with his father's determination and his mother's kindness. He knew the story of how he had been born in a snowdrift, and how Jackson had saved him and Lily, and he carried that knowledge with pride, understanding that his life had been hard-won from the very beginning. Rose, Catherine, and Grace grew into remarkable young women, each with her own personality and dreams. Rose was wild and adventurous, always the first to try something new. Catherine was thoughtful and studious, with a love of books and learning. Grace was the peacemaker, the one who could smooth over any argument and make everyone laugh. Jackson and Lily watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness of time passing. They added to their family twice more, twin boys born in 1889 who they named James and John. The twins were terrors and best friends in equal measure, and they kept the whole household on their toes. Through droughts and harsh winters, through good years and lean years, Jackson and Lily built a life together that was rich in all the ways that mattered. Their ranch prospered, not making them wealthy but providing a good, comfortable living. More importantly, they had created something lasting, a legacy of love and hard work and family that would continue long after they were gone. It was in the spring of 1900, as the new century dawned, that Jackson and Lily found themselves alone for the first time in years. Samuel was 21 and had started his own ranch with his wife, a girl from a neighboring property. Rose, at 19, was engaged to be married to a banker's son from Santa Fe. Catherine and Grace were helping at a neighbor's while the woman recovered from childbirth, and the twins were staying with friends for a few days. Jackson and Lily sat on their porch in the warm evening air, much as they had done countless times before, but this time it was just the two of them. "It is quiet," Lily observed, a smile playing at her lips. "Too quiet," Jackson agreed. "I keep waiting for someone to start crying or arguing or asking for something." "We are getting old," Lily said, though she did not sound sad about it. "Our children are grown and making their own lives." "Soon we will be grandparents. Hard to believe," Jackson mused. "Seems like just yesterday I was pulling you out of that snowdrift, and now here we are, 22 years later." 22 years of happiness," Lily said softly. 22 years of building something beautiful together." She turned to face him, and even with the lines that time had etched around her eyes and mouth, Jackson still saw the beautiful young woman he had fallen in love with. "Thank you, Jackson, for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "You gave me just as much," Jackson said, taking her hand. "More probably. You gave me a reason to come home, a reason to work hard, a reason to be better than I was. You and our children, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "I love you," Lily said, and after all these years, those words still had the power to make Jackson's heart race. "I love you too," he replied. Always have, always will. They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something extraordinary from it. Their love story had started with a scream in a snowstorm, with a desperate woman giving birth alone in freezing conditions, and with a cowboy who happened to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. It was not a traditional romance, not the kind that poets wrote about, but it was real and lasting and true. As the years continued to unfold, Jackson and Lily remained at the center of a growing family. Grandchildren came, filling their house once again with laughter and chaos. Samuel and his wife gave them 3 grandchildren, sturdy boys who loved the ranch life. Rose and her husband settled in Santa Fe but visited often with their 2 daughters. Catherine married a doctor and moved to Albuquerque, providing regular letters full of news and affection. Grace chose to remain close to home, marrying a neighboring rancher, and their 4 children were constant visitors. The twins both went into business together, running a successful freight operation, and between them, they eventually had 6 children who thought their grandparents' ranch was the finest place on earth. Through it all, through the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and setbacks that make up any long life, Jackson and Lily remained devoted to each other. They grew old together, their hair turning gray and then white, their movements slowing but their love never diminishing. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other goodnight, still found reasons to smile at each other across a crowded room. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every corner of the house and spilled out into the yard. There was food and music and laughter, and Jackson and Lily stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by the family they had built together. Samuel, now a respected rancher and father in his own right, stood to make a toast. "I want to say something about my parents," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Most of you know the story of how I came into this world, born in a blizzard to a mother who thought she would die that night. And you know how Dalton found us and saved us, and then did the even more remarkable thing of choosing to make us his family." He paused, looking at Jackson and Lily with affection. "I have never called anyone but Jackson my father, because that is what he has been to me every day of my life. He chose to love me, chose to raise me, and in doing so taught me what it means to be a man of honor and integrity. And my mother, who survived the impossible and built a life of love and grace from the ashes of loss, she taught me about resilience and faith and the power of second chances." Samuel raised his glass. "To Jackson and Lily Dalton, who found each other in a snowstorm and built an empire of love that now includes all of us. May we all be blessed with even a fraction of the love they have shared." The toast was met with cheers and clinking glasses, and Jackson felt tears stream down his face without shame. Lily was crying too, laughing through her tears, and they held each other as their family surrounded them with love and gratitude. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house was finally quiet, Jackson and Lily returned to their favorite spot on the porch. The night was warm and clear, the stars brilliant overhead, and they sat close together, comfortable in the silence. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lily asked softly. "When you pulled me out of that wagon all those years ago, did you imagine it would lead to all of this?" Jackson thought about it. "No," he admitted. "I just wanted to save you. I wanted to help someone in trouble. I had no idea it would change my entire life." "Mine too," Lily said. "I thought my life was over that night. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, a grim existence of just getting through each day. I never dreamed I could be this happy again." "I am grateful," Jackson said simply, "for every moment." Every challenge, every joy, every ordinary day, all of it led us here to this life we built together. "Me too," Lily whispered, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen each other every day since. Their love story was not perfect or easy, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection that had only deepened over the decades. Jackson thought back to that terrified young man who had heard a scream in a snowstorm and chosen to investigate instead of riding on. He thought about all the ways his life could have gone differently, all the moments that could have changed everything. But he was grateful for the path he had walked, grateful for every step that had led him to Lily and the family they had created together. As an old man, Jackson Dalton would often sit on his porch and watch the sunset over his land, thinking about his life and the blessings he had received. He and Lily lived well into their 70s, a remarkable feat for people of their time and place, and they were together until the very end. When Jackson finally passed in 1914, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, his last words were of love for Lily, who held his hand and wept but also smiled, knowing they had been given something precious and rare. Lily lived another 2 years after Jackson's death, and though she grieved deeply for her husband, she found comfort in their children and the legacy they had built together. She told stories of their life to anyone who would listen, especially the story of how they met, how Jackson had saved her and Samuel in that terrible blizzard, and how that single act of courage and compassion had led to a lifetime of love. When Lily passed in 1916, she was buried next to Jackson on a hill overlooking their ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Lily Crawford Dalton, beloved wife and mother, 1856–1916. She survived the storm and found love in the wilderness." Their children made sure that the ranch stayed in the family, passing it down through generations, and the story of Jackson and Lily became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of courage, love, and the power of choosing compassion even in the hardest circumstances. Samuel, who lived to be an old man himself, never forgot that he owed his life to two things: his mother's fierce determination to survive, and Jackson Dalton's choice to stop and help a stranger in need. He made sure his own children understood the importance of that lesson, of always being willing to help those in trouble, of never being too busy or too self-centered to offer a hand to someone who needed it. The house that Jackson built still stands today, maintained by descendants who recognize its historical and personal significance. The porch where Jackson and Lily spent countless evenings is still there, and family members still gather there to watch the sunset and remember the love story that started it all. In the end, what Jackson and Lily proved was that love can come from the most unexpected places, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things that ever happened to us. Their story was not a fairy tale with instant magic, but something better. A real, lasting love built on friendship, respect, shared values, and daily choices to care for and support each other. From a scream in a snowstorm to a lifetime of happiness, from strangers thrown together by fate to partners who chose each other every single day, Jackson and Lily Dalton's love story became the foundation for generations of family who understood that love is not just about feeling, but about action, about showing up, about choosing the other person even when it is hard. And it all started because one cowboy heard a cry for help in a blizzard and decided that helping a stranger was more important than his own comfort or safety. That single decision changed everything, creating ripples that spread out through time, affecting not just Jackson and Lily, but their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who came after. Their story reminds us that we never know when we might be at a turning point, when a single choice might change the entire trajectory of our lives. Jackson could have ridden past that overturned wagon. Lily could have given up before help arrived. But they both chose to fight, to survive, to hope. And in doing so they found each other and built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. The legacy of Jackson and Lily Dalton lives on not just in their descendants, but in the values they embodied and passed down. Courage in the face of adversity, compassion for those in need, the importance of family, and the transformative power of love. Their story, which began with such tragedy and desperation, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding joy even after the darkest times. And somewhere in the New Mexico wilderness, on a hill overlooking land that was carved from raw territory through hard work and determination, two headstones stand side by side, marking the final resting place of two people who found each other in a snowstorm and spent the rest of their lives grateful for that frozen night that brought them together.